It's a great honor for me to be here at the Empire Club of Canada today, which is arguably the most famous and historically relevant speakers podium to have ever existed in Canada. It has offered its podium to such international luminaries as Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, Audrey Hepburn, the Dalai Lama, Indira Gandhi, and closer to home, from Pierre Trudeau to Justin Trudeau. Literally generations of our great nation's leaders, alongside with those of the world's top international diplomats, heads of state, and business and thought leaders.
It is a real honor and a distinct privilege to be invited to speak to the Empire Club of Canada, which has been welcoming international diplomats, leaders in business and in science and in politics. When they stand at that podium, they speak not only to the entire country, but they can speak to the entire world.
Good afternoon, fellow directors, past presidents, members, and guests. Welcome to the 117th season of the Empire Club of Canada. My name is Antoinette Tumilo. I'm the president of the Empire Club of Canada and your host for today's virtual event featuring another very special guest that I've had the privilege of working with, Sean Finn, Executive Vice President, Corporate Services and Chief Legal Officer, working for a company that is still very dear and close to my heart after having spent 18 years working there, and that's CN. Sean, I'm going to get teary. I loved CN. I have my CN paraphernalia. Look at this. They didn't make me hand it in, all my pins. Look.
Good.
Sean will speak to how CN has faced many challenges, and those challenges were not just about the pandemic in 2020. So before we get started, I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors who generously support the Empire Club and make these events possible. Our lead event sponsor today is Waste Connections of Canada, who's also a seasoned sponsor. Our supporting sponsor is Tories, and our other seasoned sponsor is the Canadian Bankers Association. I also want to thank our event partner, VVC and livemeeting.ca, for webcasting today's event. Now, I've got a few logistical items to share. First, if you're finding your internet feed is slow, please see below and click the Switch Streams button. And don't hesitate to press the Request for Help button available to you if you're experiencing technical difficulties. Our team will be more than happy to assist you. It is now my pleasure to call this virtual meeting to order. CN holds a unique place in Canadian history. The unforgettable people, iconic landscapes, and exciting innovations have all marked our great railroad through time. But since its creation 100 years ago, CN has faced many challenging situations, especially this past year with an unfortunate work disruption, illegal blockades on its railroad, and the COVID-19 pandemic. CN is essential to the economy, to its customers, and to the communities it serves by safely transporting more than 300 million tons of natural resources, manufactured products, and finished goods throughout North America every year. CN had to react quickly to maintain its operations. Sean Finn will discuss how CN navigated through a succession of exceptional circumstances, including going from being a government-owned company to a public company 25 years ago, which I shared that journey with Sean for a few years and was at CN till about 99. So that was a lot of fun, and that was just celebrated last week, I believe. He'll share what they learned from it and how CN adapted the way it conducts business and plans on doing so for another 100 years. So let me introduce Sean Finn. Sean was appointed Executive Vice President, Corporate Services and Chief Legal Officer in December 2008. He first joined CN in January 94 and led the company's corporate tax function while being involved extensively in CN's privatization in November 95. He quickly rose through the ranks after that. He took over Treasury and the tax group, then became Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary, then took over Public Affairs team as well. Prior to joining CN, Sean was the managing tax partner with the Montreal law firm Lavery de Billy. He graduated from the Faculty of Law of the Université de Montréal, and completed a master's degree in tax law at the University of Toronto. He was admitted to the Quebec Bar in 1983 and was named Tax Lawyer of the Year in 2000. I will have you all note that Sean Finn is perfectly bilingual, and I'm talking about his French. With a name like Sean Finn, hopefully he'll share some of that with us on this call today. Sean is a former chairman of the Canadian and Quebec Chambers of Commerce, and he's currently the only Canadian member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In 2018, Sean was the inaugural recipient of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's Emeritus Leader Circle Award for his commitment to advancing the CCC's mission and vision. And in his spare time from 2005 to 2009, Sean was the mayor of the city of St. Lambert. So, quite a busy guy, and there's lots of stuff that I haven't shared with you that maybe Sean will about his background too. Sean will be taking a few minutes to tell us about CN's journey over the last year. I will then have the opportunity of asking Sean a few questions, and if I know Sean, he may have a few of me. But Sean, note, I'm the one asking the questions, not you. Okay?
Got that, yeah.
So I do want to remind everyone on this call that this is an interactive call. So take advantage of the question box to the right of your screen. Let us know what's on your mind. And if you have any questions for Sean, we've saved some time at the end to do that. So Sean Finn, a very warm welcome to the Empire Club. The stage is now yours.
Antoinette, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to spend some time, not in the podium, but at least in front of the screen on the Empire Club with your board members and people attending today, including Gord McIver, who special advisor to the board and past president of the Empire Club. And often, Antoinette, it's great to see you again. Spend some time with you. I appreciate it very much. And as like at the Canadian Chamber, the Empire Club could put on these events because they have outstanding sponsors. I want to recognize that the lead event sponsor today is Waste Connections of Canada, Izzy Abrams, who I know well. Izzy, great to at least hear of you, but also thank you very much for your sponsorship, and also the other sponsors who accepted to support today's event, but also the Empire Club. If it can do what it does for over 117 years, is because people have sponsored in the past. So it's important that we support these institutions. They play a key role in us allowing to network each other, especially today virtually, but also in creating public policy and allowing the private sector, governments, academics come together at these events and exchange ideas, which makes, I think, Canada stronger. Obviously, Antoinette was very gracious. She did spend many, many years at CN. She was at CN from 1981 until 1999, so that's 18 years, of which, and this is surprising when you think about it, because when I joined in 94, that is a year and a half or almost 2 years before our privatization, which was on November 17th, 1998. And Antoinette spent 17 years in a federal 14 years in a federal crown corporation from 81 to 95. And then she spent 4 years in the private sector at a private company, then being CN. And, we all think about people who work in crown corporations. Sometimes we think that, they can be bureaucratic and, a bit old school. But Antoinette joined CN right out of high school, I think. But more importantly, Antoinette was one of the people at CN who was a real internal entrepreneur, was not a standard crown corporation executive. Many of my colleagues, and in those days, our CEO, Paul Tellier, Antoinette was a very strong executive in a very male-dominated industry back in 1995. And we were sorry to see her leave in 99, but she did leave her mark. We left as a crown corporation with a big portfolio of real estate that Antoinette had put together. And she was also key in as we were privatized, we had to hand over almost 325,000 acres of real estate to the government of Canada. We kept some back to create some cash flow in the years that followed the IPO, but Antoinette was the person with the team that created Canada Lands Corporation that inherited the CN Tower, as you know well, in Toronto, as well as a lot of the real estate. And that real estate, has been in the federal government's portfolio, has been used to reinvest in other endeavors or create parks or very special places. And that was put together by Antoinette and her team of people. So it does exist. We must realize that both in the federal bureaucracy or federal government, but also in Crown Corporation, there are some very strong executives that can play a key role in making those companies stronger, but also can transition very, very easily. And Antoinette is one of them from the government-owned Crown Corporation to the private sector. So I want to recognize Antoinette's contribution to CN's success. And I say so jokingly, we held back some real estate because, right after the IPO, we had not had positive cash flow at CN for 75 years. We're all pretty proud of the IPO. It was the biggest IPO in Canadian history at the time, at 2.25 billion Canadian. But we forget sometimes that there was 75 years of a federal Crown Corporation in which all of us, taxpayers in Canada, had invested 90 billion. So it's pretty easy to take an asset of that quality, do an IPO, and be successful. The challenge was to create free cash flow out of operating a railway. So just to make sure we had some free cash flow, people won't acknowledge this. We kept back some real estate, and we were able to sell some, towards the end of the year to make sure. I remember at the first year of the IPO in 1996, Michael Sabia said, we'll have at least $100 of free cash flow. We had a bit more than that, but it was a challenge to do so. To give you an idea today, we generate on a quarterly basis substantial amounts of free cash flow, and it's what makes us a strong company able to reinvest. So we have been free cash flow positive since 1996, and that was probably the hallmark of our privatization, making sure that we could operate a railway which is highly capital intensive, but still generate enough revenue and enough free cash flow to make sure every year we can reinvest the capex that's required to keep the railway safe. So I think, Antoinette, you mentioned the fact that it was 25 years ago last week. It's been 100 years. The company celebrated on June 19th, 1999, our 100th anniversary of coming together of 12 bankrupt railways. You probably remember this, but in 1919, the federal government essentially nationalized 12 bankrupt railways. We're not celebrating 100 years of bankruptcy. We're celebrating 100 years of success. But it was our anniversary, and allowed us at that moment in time to put together a container village that went across Canada. We went from essentially Winnipeg to Vancouver on a multi-city stop. We were planning on coming east in the spring of 2020. We'd have done Ottawa, Toronto, Moncton, and Montreal, but because of COVID-19, we couldn't do it. But we will come back. We've determined that we will be back hopefully in 2021 with that container village, calling a moving celebration, talking about our 100 years of history. And if you have a chance, those of you, we published a book for the anniversary of CN, which is a tabletop coffee table book, that talks about building 100 years of legacy. That's worthwhile to get a hand on, look at, because it gives you a good idea of where we came from. So, long story short, it's been 100 years of success. The last 25 have been very challenging, but if there's one takeaway, I would say to you that a lot of people didn't believe in CN's privatization in November of 1995. We have been successful because we inherited a very good asset. A lot of people, some are on the call today, were there before us, that left us behind a legacy of a railway that was customer focused, willing to understand that nobody had to own our stock. Nobody had to ship goods on CN. There's the odd shipper that has less choices, but most shippers have choices. And part of our DNA, you'll appreciate this, Antoinette, is that, we take nothing for granted. Even today, 25 years after, all 26,000 railroaders come to work every day. And he or she do so because they realize that our service is essential to our customers, is essential to the communities where we operate. But also, we have to earn our right to serve our customers every day. There is strong competition, both from the trucking industry, but also from other railways, both in Canada and the U.S. So, one thing we don't do at CN, we take nothing for granted. Everything is done thinking about how can we get better at it, but more importantly, how do we recognize, it's great to say you're essential. It's great to realize that the last year have proven that between the strike, the blockades, and now the pandemic, but you can't take it for granted. And secondly, it comes with a responsibility to make sure that you're there to serve the essential services that are required by our customers and communities. So in a nutshell, Antoinette, those are my opening remarks. I'm looking forward to our back and forth discussion and be more than happy to take any questions as we go along also.
Thank you, Sean. And I'm glad I was one of those executives that had a lot of confidence at the IPO time. I got to tell you, we didn't have a lot of money, my husband and I, and we decided we're going to do it. And I'm very happy today with all the shares that I hold. And I'm proud to say I haven't sold one share. I think I shared that with you. And I'm glad to see that Bill Gates is a big, big investor. So if Bill Gates invests in you guys, the promise is still there to keep doing great things. So I have a lot of confidence in you guys. But, you talked about your history, 100 years. And I know when I was there were a lot of people that were at the railway that were very entrepreneurial. I mean, we did some amazing things in the years that I was there. And the company really did like to go outside the box, and some did it better than others. There were always some people who were the laggards, but I'm just curious, 100 years, lots of challenges that you had to face. You look at the IPO, lots of challenges going from a, crown corporation to a commercial entity. And that transition and that learning, just curious, what are the key qualities that help CN keep going? Like you had these three situations to deal with. Like, what are the key qualities that the company has learned and gained and, keeps forging ahead?
Yeah, I think, Antoinette, from Paul Tellier to today, JJ Viret, they would all tell you, and all of us who've worked with them, this is not a one-man show, but you need strong leadership at the top and you need a vision. And I think that's how we were very fortunate with Paul Tellier when he took over the Crown Corporation in 1993 and got it ready for the IPO, prioritized it, and stayed until 2008. Yeah, 2002, excuse me, 2002. But during that 10-year period, Paul got the company ready with Michael and Claude Mongeau and a lot of people who worked on it, Jack McBain and people like that who were railroaders. But it brought together a melting pot of, external people coming in, including myself, people like you, Antoine, who spent years here, but who realized that it was not a sustainable model. One way you measure a railway success is how many cents must it spend to earn $1 of revenue. We were prioritized, we'd have to spend $1.01 to earn $1 of revenue. Today we spend 59 cents to earn $1 revenue. So getting the cost under control is one thing, but also, Paul was a change agent, but he was able to bring together very strong railroading ethic and discipline with an entrepreneur spirit of, going public. Having quarterly meetings does focus the mind. But it wasn't just saying it. He made us realize that we had to perform if we wanted to keep people investing and to attract some of the Bill Gates' foundation. We had to make sure that they realized that we knew what we were doing, but more importantly, we had a long-term vision. And so to answer your question, I think Paul's leadership, but also capable of identifying and setting out a vision for the company from, the IPO in 95 to when he retired in 2002 to go work for Bombardier. Paul, was systematically telling us the story. Why are we doing this? What must we achieve? And during that period, we had purchased the Illinois Central Railway, which goes from, in those days, went from Chicago all to New Orleans. And all of a sudden, because of NAFTA and Paul's understanding of the North American economy and network, we bought this railway in Chicago and became truly no longer just an east-west railway, but also a north-south railway. And all of a sudden, we were leveraging the trade flows into the U.S. But came with Illinois Central was Hunter Harrison, one of the better railroaders, I think, in the industry at the time, and even today, God rest his soul. But he took us on a new journey. He took us from, now an investor-driven company into making sure that we were the best we could be from an operating perspective. Because ultimately, there was a time when some would say that, Paul Tellier ran the company, and Hunter Harrison operated the railway. It was the same thing. They did so together. But Hunter brought us to a discipline of how we operate the railway. There are good things, and we had our challenges when it comes to some areas of serving customers. But the second CEO brought a new vision, a more disciplined approach in how we operate the railway, controlling our costs, but also growing the top line. So a lot of people just think that Hunter's recipe was cutting costs. Hunter was very conscious that the best way to improve your operating ratio is to increase your revenue. So my second comment is Hunter's leadership. And then Claude's, strategic mind. He had been with the company since the IPO. He took over from Hunter in 2010, and for 7 years, kept the journey going with a new innovative approach, and probably a bit more focused on making sure we were a bit more customer centric. So to answer your question, those three CEOs brought a lot to the table. They had a very strong vision, a strong leadership, but they had a group of people who were willing to follow. And that's something about railroaders. Give them a goal, give them a direction, and sort of get out of their way because they're going to deliver. And that has its strengths when it comes to doing things. Sometimes has its weaknesses. We don't necessarily plan as much as we should, and we might be a knee-jerk reaction. But to answer your question, getting us out of the federal government's constraints, probably, with three strong leaders that could transform the organization as people were coming in, and some people were retiring after long years, but never forgetting that we got here because of the long tradition of being a very strong railway. Even we're a Crown Corporation with strong work ethics, but also I come back to my comment. You need strong leaders, but you need people also who are humble enough to realize that we can't take this for granted. It's not because we have a great logo people buy our services, because we provide good service, and you can never lose that. One last thing, I think we've gotten a lot better when it comes also to how we engage with communities. We had years where we were not as friendly, but I think following the Lac-Mégantic accident in Quebec, where 47 Canadians lost their lives on July 6th, 2013, I think that upped our game, where we became all of a sudden a lot more conscious of the importance of us to engage locally with communities, with farmer associations and ag. So I think today, even though we're publicly traded, we're a railway, the technology hasn't evolved. I think the people at CN have evolved, and today we realize that, to be successful in the railway industry, you must be safe, you must serve your customers, you must have employees who are engaged, and you mustn't forget that our railway goes through 1,400 communities, and you have to be a good neighbor. If not, you have no success.
I think you've got a good map to share with us on your on the network.
Yeah, maybe that'd be a good time. Yeah, it's hard to talk about the railway without a map, so maybe you can put up the map for a second.
Yeah, I think that would be great. As you were talking, while they're putting that up, as you were talking, I could still hear Mr. Tellier's speeches that we would have in the town halls. We'd always go in there, we'd be super pumped because we were getting great results. The operating ratio was going down and we were proud, but he'd always end his speech with, but it's not enough. We got to do more, and here's why, and here's what we got to do. And we'd go out there and come out and say, okay, was he complimenting us, or is he telling us we're not doing enough? Do you remember those meetings?
Yeah, I worked for Paul directly for Paul from 2000 to 2002, but with him the day I arrived in the company. And obviously Paul was a great leader, had a great vision, but he made us, that's what leaders often do. They make people achieve things they thought they couldn't achieve. And Paul was a master at that. He still is today. And I think that if CN is successful, it's the journey that Paul set us on, but also that Hunter and Claude and today JJ are making sure that we continue down the road. But the competition's got wise to us. They're as good as railroaders as we are now. So our game now will be to how do you raise your game to the next level? How will technology improve what we're going? So I guess we have people can see the map properly.
Yeah. So as you address that map, maybe you can share with us, how you managed through those three crises. It's demanding of any company, and you had just running a railway is difficult. Now you had these three crises, boom, 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 one after another. What motivated CN to persevere and find solutions? And here's the map showing this broad area you're covering. So over to you.
Yeah, I think the map sort of tells a story, of the journey after the IPO. You can see probably if they showed you this map in 1995, you would go to Chicago and nothing south. But you look at the map today, and you just take a step back, and it's always this is our footprint. This is our franchise. This is what our value is really driven by. But if you look at it for a second, you look at the fact that we serve Prince Rupert, Vancouver on the west coast, Halifax on the east coast, down the Mississippi to New Orleans. So we're the only railway in North America that serves the three coasts. Obviously, as we're growing the business, the future growth of our railway is very much intermodal containers, as you know, that come in through Halifax and Rupert and Prince George, and Vancouver. That want to come either east or west into Toronto, into our Brampton intermodal yard, which is very much at capacity. And those of you who follow the media closely in Ontario, we're working very hard to build a logistics park to be an overflow yard to serve our customers in the GTHA in Milton. We've been working on it for 7 years. We've done the full environmental assessment with a panel, and we're looking forward to get a decision, hopefully in the coming weeks, from the federal government, allowing us to build the intermodal terminal, which will allow us to serve our customers, because this traffic is coming in through these ports and must come inland to terminals. You can't drop off the box from a plane. If you don't have the railway coming into Milton or into Brampton, the trains will stop in Chicago, Winnipeg, Cornwall, Montreal, and they get trucked in. And I think last time I checked, the 401's got enough trucks. So we're pushing very hard. But to give you an example of, that's an innovative way of us of doing things, making sure that we have the capacity, and we're looking forward to the approval on Milton. When it comes to the map itself, why I raise the map is you can look at, for us Canadians, the message is very simple. Use Canada as the gateway to North America. So, have your containers, your goods come in through Rupert, Vancouver, get on the railway, in the case of Rupert on CN, in the case of Vancouver, CN or CP, into Halifax or St. John on CN or CP, and then get onto a Canadian network, get through the border, which must remain fluid, and all of a sudden you can get, a box off a ship in Rupert, onto a train, and in Chicago, faster than you get the box off a ship in Long Beach, California, because of the congestion and the time constraints. So obviously that is a competitive advantage for Canada, for the railways in Canada, and it relies on one thing, that border remains very fluid. But we're also very, very pleased that, every single container that goes through the Canada-US border goes through a Bacchus machine or an X-ray machine, which is not the case for trucks. So the network is, what is important to us, and by this footprint, I often try and explain to people, you look at this map and don't take your box from, Quebec City to Montreal. You want to get goods going from Quebec City, Montreal to Memphis to Jackson, and elsewhere in the deep South US, but also get access to the Northeast markets. So CN is well positioned for that. Now, it comes with this large footprint, of 19,000 miles. We're an outside sport. You need all 26,000 employees to do their job every day. There's probably one industry where I often tell my colleagues, a CN employee, he or she, who do their job very well, make a difference every day. Because if a local carman inspecting a train coming out of a yard does his job well, or her job well, and picks up a defect on a train, avoids a derailment, that's a major contribution to our success for that given day. The same way, if that same employee does not do his job well, it can have a major impact on our success. So our employees every day come to work. Safety is a core value, but also they realize that we have a very important responsibility to move these goods safely. And every person who comes to work makes a difference at CN, and that's important also. Which means when you have a strike and you lose, 3,000 people in the cab of a locomotive for 9 days, it impacts the railway. And to answer your question about the last year, we had a strike that lasted 9 days in the fall of 1999, ended a year ago today after 9 days of that outage. The railway came to essentially a halt. We were able to run about 10% of our traffic. And, luckily when you have a strike, and I'll compare it to a blockade, you can plan the shutdown a little bit in advance, so you can park the trains in a way that the network can regain its fluidity after the strike. So in the case of the strike, 9 days of very little service, but we were able to stage our equipment, our trains, and our train crews to recover relatively quickly. So the strike was 9 days, but I tell you, by the middle of December, we were back at our normal run rate when it came to trains operating on our network and serving our customers. So we caught up relatively quickly. And that's one thing about this network, Antoinette, and also us, the resilience of the railway. If you have a shutdown or, God forbid, an incident that shuts down the railway for 1 or 2 days, the railroaders will focus on getting the railway reopened as quickly as possible, but also getting back to a normal fluid service to our customers. So that's part of our DNA. And, you know, I don't like to say this, but because we have incidents on the railway, we have an expertise on how to deal with them, which means when the railway gets shut down, we have our expertise on how to restart it, which we did last fall. So that was one issue. Now, a blockade is very different because we had a 21-day blockade in Belleville, Ontario in February, so in the middle of the winter. That you can't plan for. That you have trains backed up all the way to Halifax on one side, all the way to Winnipeg on the other. But we didn't just have one blockade. We had 19 blockades for the network, and it really impacted our service for those 19 days. Obviously, you can appreciate very frustrating for my operating colleagues, but also, you know, we realized that governments and the OPP had to do its job, do so safely, make sure that these blockades come to an end in a peaceful fashion. So we were patient. Our customers were very patient, obviously, but you know, you have a 21-day blockade and you cut off the traffic from east to west out of Eastern Canada right to Toronto. We could serve the West, we could serve the U.S., but you know, the amount of products that come from the East is somewhat surprising. Lumber, for example, aluminum comes from the East, and the other way around. Propane coming from Sarnia to people in Quebec was cut off. So, but again, you know, people are resilient. I can tell you, it's 21 days of coming into the office, painfully trying to find a solution to a problem that was not caused by us. But, you know, we realized the importance of it. We doubled down, and I think we all realized that we have to be a lot more proactive dealing with, you know, with some of the issues that were raised during that blockade. But also, you know, blockading the track is not a safe way to protest. We have been very adamant about the fact that, you know, the railway is it's not a playground. It's not safe to block track. And you can imagine, you know, there could be a victim on the ground, but we have, you know, 2 employees in a cab of a locomotive that are running a 12,000-foot train at, you know, 40 miles an hour. It's going to take you 2 miles to stop the train. So if a blockade pops up in front of a train, those 2 people in the cab know they can't stop. And God forbid, we had no accidents, no fatalities. But, you know, my message to all Canadians was last year, and again this year, is, you know, there are other ways to protest peacefully, I'm sure, but occupying a railway track unannounced is not a safe behavior. Secondly, we can under no circumstances condone it in any way. And more importantly, it's up to us to make sure that Canadians realize that, you know, this network is essential to our customers and to the service. Finally, we get the blockade lifted, I think was on February 21st, 2 weeks after the pandemic hits us. And, you know, the railway never stopped operating. You know, our 26,000 employees came to work every day. Some got to work from home, but the majority of our employees, you know, were on a cab of a locomotive, were maintaining track, and, you know, they came to work. And, you know, we thanked them enormously because they had family at home, they had kids not in school, and they didn't miss a beat. We moved record amounts of grain, for example, from January all the way to October. So I must say that we had a bit of a slowdown in carloads during the months of April and May. It's come back relatively strong, but you know, we never took our eye off the ball. And that is also part, to answer your question, I think it's the resilience of our railroaders and also the quality of our network allows us to recover from these incidents. But I must say, Antoinette, like 3 in a year, it's a bit much. And a lot of our employees have worked very hard. They're looking forward to getting some downtime over Christmas. But, you know, these are committed employees and very proud employees. And if we're successful today, it's because all 26,000 employees come to work every day and do their jobs. And they're not the type of people looking to get credit. They appreciate being thanked, obviously, but they're very proud of their work. And that's something I think that we as a company and we as executives have to recognize that is a very valuable and precious asset of having employees that have a very, very high level of being proud, but also of engagement. And it's something you can't take for granted. And therefore, you know, I thank them all for their hard work in the last 12 months. And we're looking forward to a 2021, which hope will be a bit more run of the mill, just run the railway, and hopefully have less crisis and less incidents to deal with on a daily basis.
Wow, what a year. So overall, how did all these challenges affect CN from a business standpoint, did you experience a loss or gain in business? Are people feeling like, okay, the railway's the way to go, or a lot of people shutting down, not operating? Like, how has it affected you?
Yeah, I think the pandemic, because everybody was in it, I think, our customers had a tough time, and we're there to serve them. So obviously, very engaged with them. I think it raised our awareness of how essential our services are, not just internally, but I must say across Canada and in provincial capitals, but also in Ottawa, where I think that more and more Canadians now realize that this railway is essential to our customers and the communities where they operate in. One. Secondly, I think that we always say it's a sort of lip service, but communicating with our customers is often a challenge and something we don't do as well as we could. But I think the last year has really raised our game, because we find that the more we talk to our customers, and even including communities where we operate on, we get them informed of the strike because they count on us. I think that my takeaway, and I think a lot of my colleagues would say, we're not perfect. We have good days and bad days at CN. But if we are in a position to communicate to our customers, to stakeholders, to our partners, that, what is going on, because it's, we're a big railway and people don't see the whole network, and tell them how what we're going to do or not do will impact them, they become very, very supportive. And I think that, I must say to the level of recognition by the Canadian grain industry, the farmers in Western Canada, the blockade, the strike, and the pandemic has just raised, like I said to you before, the awareness of how important the railways are to our economy in Canada and North America. But, it's a big but, I tell my colleagues, comes with that, that recognition, a responsibility that when our customers need us, when the grain industry needs us, and when in Western Canada, we must be there, which means we must invest the capital, we must buy the cars, we must make sure we have enough locomotives, we must make sure we have the employees to serve the business. Otherwise, you end up saying we're essential, but only when we want to be. Well, that doesn't work. So I think to answer your question, Antoinette, what's driven us through this resilience? The fact that we have invested a lot. We've invested $10 billion of capital in our railway in the last 3 years. That means, to give you an idea, every dollar of revenue we earn, between 20 to 25 cents, depending on the year, go back into the network, to maintain it, to keep it safe, but also for expansion. So that's a very high level. And our run rate's about 20%, which is even higher than our U.S. colleagues. But that's because, this is an outdoor sport. The railway must be safe to be successful, but also we must invest to make sure that we're resilient, not for strikes, blockades, and pandemics, but for winter, for unforeseen events, but also for our customers' expansion. We're seeing, our customers growing in Canada, mostly in Western Canada, but also in the East. The ports are getting more and more traffic, and they're counting on us, CN, the railway, to be there to serve them. So, this pandemic or this last year is, we're essential, but I'm very much of the school that comes with that responsibility to make sure that we plan our affairs and we maintain our railway and we invest in a way that we'll be there for our customers for many, many more years to come, and not just 8 months of the year when it's nice outside, 12 months of the year when it's minus 40 in Saskatoon, and you have to switch grain cars. You can't say, well, the technology, it doesn't work well at minus 40. Well, in the meantime, that grain's got to move to port because the grain farmers have customers in Asia. They're expected to get the grain delivered, and they don't know what minus 40 feels like. So that's our problem, not theirs.
So how has the pandemic changed the way you do business, or has it changed the way you do business, or the way you run the railway?
Yeah, I think, I'll give you one little example, and it's really accelerated our recognition that technology is going to be the next transformation at CN. So, we've come from Crown Corporation to private corporation. We've come from, great, good operators to great operators because of Hunter. We've come from, not great with customers to a bit more customer-centric. A lot of work to do still there, but very much so under Claude. And now technology. And I think that's going to be our next. And we saw this, when we could no longer have our train crews, right? So the train crew has a conductor, an engineer in every cab. When they report to work, they go into a check-in bungalow or check-in office where they download their operating instructions, do a safety briefing, and then get to their train and leave. Well, with the pandemic, we couldn't have our crews go and meet in a check-in room, running the risk that they would, get infected by COVID-19. So they're all now equipped with an iPad, which, most people have, but we didn't have them. They now take their operating instructions on the iPad in the cab of a locomotive. They can check in by the iPad. They get their switching assignments on the iPad. So the pandemic has forced us to change how we work as railroaders on a daily basis, recognizing we need self-isolation, but has accelerated the use of technology. So to answer your question, I think it's only reinforced all of us, our board, but also I think our investors, recognizing that if CN wants to remain the leader as the most effective and highest performing railway in North America, we have to make sure that technology is our next transformation. So going from IT to operating technology and using that to accelerate our service, but also the railways are renowned. We're very good moving our trains from yard to yard. Not so good from loading dock to loading dock. So we call it often the first mile, last mile. Well, technology has to help us and our customers better understand, how CN is going to perform on that famous first mile and last mile. So the pandemic has raised the awareness on how we have to change how we work. And secondly, really point us in the direction that, the solution for that is technology. Now, there's two people in the cab of a locomotive. They are exactly 6 feet apart. So things like wearing masks were mandatory as of May, and our employees have been very cooperative. We've had very few cases of COVID-19 for the size of our company, and it just goes to the fact that our employees realize that this was important because if we lose too many train crews in a place like Melville, Saskatchewan, you might have locomotives and track and cars, but you need crews to move those trains. So I want to thank our employees again for their disciplined approach and also their understanding, but also their commitment to make sure that we stay safe, because safety is not just about, on the railway, it's about safety coming to work in a safe environment, a healthy environment, and safety is a core value. So I think, Antoinette, to answer your question, the walk away from the pandemic is how important technology will be to transform CN to this next vision and its next journey. Great.
I have more questions, but I think I'm going to shift to the audience questions because a few are coming in. We've got one from Peter, and he says, in their annual reports, VIA talks a lot about their challenges in dealing with host railways and the need for the government to address the inherent imbalance in bargaining power. What is CN's perspective on this problem?
Well, I think it's important. VIA has always been an important customer of ours, circulates on our network. As you know, we run the trains from Montreal to Toronto, from the Quebec City-Windsor corridor. We ran GO trains in Toronto for many, many years. So I want to debunk this perception that the freight railways, as host railways, we own the track, but as host railways, don't work well with passengers. We work very well with passenger service. Our train crews and our rail traffic controllers understand that a commuter train can't be late because you can't show up at Union Station an hour late and go to work. But these are, the issue often comes down to capital investment, and we've been very successful. We run the Metro in Chicago, but on the South Shore of Montreal, we ran the commuter trains run on us. And, we work with them well because they allow us to invest more capital because they need reliability and just-in-time service, obviously. But, they don't use the track in the middle of the night. So it allows us to get capital investments to upgrade our track to give better service to the commuters, in exchange for which we get to use the capacity overnight. Now, the Montreal to Toronto corridor VIA is our most busiest corridor. And, every time you want to add another train, you define rail capacity by using what you have as the asset. When you want to grow it, you need either more track or you need some way to get more trains in the same capacity. So, I think that our business corridors are challenges, and that's why some people think that we don't work well with VIA. I think we work very well with VIA. We have to be obviously work on making sure we remain reliable. But VIA wants to expand. It wants to have more capacity and more frequencies. And we have customers also. And, if we start, VIA has its windows and we make sure we serve them as much as we can, respecting their schedules, but the capacity that's there, our customers use it also. So, freight railways and passenger railways who have high frequency and high speed probably don't share the same track well together. So I'd submit to you, we and VIA work well together. I think we've done a good job over the years. I think VIA has come to a point now, it wants to increase its frequency and it wants to grow its business on the Quebec City to Windsor corridor. And there's only so much capacity. So I think that's where we're seeing them, looking to invest on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River to have a dedicated track if they could. Go Transit's a good example. They bought most of our network in Toronto, and they run dedicated trains, obviously, on their track. We have the odd switcher that gets in the way in Oshawa, and my good friend Phil Vister calls me regularly about that. But I tell Phil we'll get the train out of the way because the commuters in Oshawa don't want to be waiting, in the yard in Oshawa, going to work in downtown Toronto because a slow switcher at 5 miles an hour is serving one customer. So we're aware of that. And that's important too. I think it's important that people realize our friends at VIA, they do great work. They need more dedicated track, but nobody at CN sits in a rail traffic control center and purposely puts a passenger train in a siding to let by a freight train. They all know, CN likes moving freight. It doesn't talk back to us. But our rail traffic controllers know there are real people, and often their families know trains. So we don't do it, in a way that's in any way purposeful. But we have to work together. But when you get to a point, if the capacity is required, and we only have so much of it, and unless there's lots of money invested, I think time will come where VIA will be looking to have its own dedicated track to grow its business.
And that conversation's been going on for a long time, because I remember those discussions with VIA and how generous CN was, giving them all the railway stations for a buck, and was involved in all those discussions. Have another question here from Jack. How does CN approach Indigenous relations, given there have been times marked by protest blockades along your lines? How does CN build constructive relations with Indigenous people?
Yeah, so we, I'm very conscious of that, and it's in my responsibility at CN, that relationship. We have lots of work to do. We have been neighbors with these communities across Canada for over 100 years. We have good days and bad days. I wouldn't attribute the blockades to that relationship. I think the blockades are often caused by an external force, but we have to do better. And we've done a lot of work since 2002. We've developed a Indigenous strategy for us. We've done a lot of training with our first line supervisors and engineering people. We go through almost 300 First Nation communities across Canada, so they are our neighbors in a lot of places in Canada. We have mentorship programs and internship programs where we have young Indigenous people come work for us in our offices in Montreal for the summer, for example, and elsewhere in the network. But we have more work to do. We're about 4% Indigenous population in the overall employee base at CN. We have to do more. We have to get better at diversity and inclusion. And that community is very important to us. We are presently working on creating an Aboriginal Council, which will be an advisor to our board and to our CEO, with the help of Frank Yakibuchi from the Tories firm, and David Johnson, the former Governor General, is helping us. But also, we already have a pretty good relationship with Indigenous people across Canada. And that's going to raise our game even more. I think we have to raise our awareness. But, it comes down to something very, very basic, and it applies to Indigenous, to any community in Canada. I'm of the view the railway cannot take its neighbors for granted. Antoine, remember this? When I joined 25 years ago, you spoke to an operating person. You said, listen, you're parking the locomotive next to this new development. Can we move it somewhere else? And the operating person would say to me, no, Sean, you don't understand. They're not our neighbors. We're their neighbors, but we were there first. That's changed today, happily. I think we all recognize that we have neighbors across Canada. We can't pick up our track and move. We're there for another 100 years, what we do today. So we put a full court press in developing strong relationships with those communities. We put a full court press in developing strong relations with the ag industry. We have to do more in the Indigenous area. We have good relationships, but we have to be a lot more innovative, but also think about the future and develop together employment, obviously economic development, and help these communities grow. But also, these are good jobs at CN, but we have to adapt to the reality that you can't take a First Nation young lady from her community and move her 6 times in 10 years because of the railway. It's not going to happen that way. So we have more work to do, but we're really focusing on, as we all should, on diversity and inclusion. And for us in Canada, this is job number one when it comes to the Indigenous communities that we operate in.
Great. I'm going to squeeze in one question, but you got to promise to be quick.
I will.
On the answer on this one, although it's not an easy one. This one's from Brian. What steps will CN take to reduce GHG emissions? More biodiesel, electric trains?
So two comments. One, we are a very environmental friendly technology to move a ton of freight versus other technologies, but we still consume a lot of diesel. We have done some testing with mixing diesel with natural gas, an issue of how the technology is there, but obviously we're very focused on it. And I must say a lot of our colleagues on the sustainability side are really focused. So, we're looking at, net zero by 2050. We have a role to play in that. So we are currently looking at how, we can better operate locomotives, better control the consumption of fuel. But we recognize, we have a role to play. You can't sit back and say we can move freight, long distances more environmentally. We still consume a lot of diesel fuel. So I think we're going to say technology evolve. One issue we have, the locomotive technology is North American. These locomotives are built in the US or in Canada, but they're used across the network. So we have to make sure the technology is adopted by all the railways. If not, we'll be stuck at the border, taking off our locomotives and then putting on somebody else's would not be good for customer service. But I can just tell you that, the environmental portfolio is at the top of our agenda at CN. And we're determined to play a key role. It's not sufficient to be in the Dow Jones, environmental list. We have to make sure that every day we do our job, and we are. Our employees expect that from us today, and that's going to be a driving force going forward.
Great. Well, thank you, Sean. All right, I'd like to now introduce Izzy Abrams, Vice President, Government and External Affairs at Waste Connections of Canada, to provide the appreciation remarks. But I do want to just make one little note. It was Izzy's idea to invite you, Sean. Like, we were having a conversation of who should we get to the table? And he said, how about Sean Finn? So over to you, Izzy.
Thank you, Antoinette. And Sean, good to see you again. It's been a while, probably far too long. But I do want to thank you for taking the time and adding to the public discourse and sharing your insights with us. But more importantly, I want to thank you for moving goods and resources that are so vital to the Canadian economy, and congratulations on your 100 years. But and here's to a good outcome on the Milton Intermodal Yard. I've been watching that closely, so lots of good success on that, and continued good success with CN. So thank you again.
Izzy, thank you very much. Really appreciate the invitation, and all the best at Empire Club for many more years to come.
Great. Well, this was a very interesting discussion. I could go on another hour with questions, Sean, but unfortunately we don't have that. I would like to just take a moment to share with everybody our upcoming events, and we've got quite a few over the next several weeks. We've got the Honorable Doug Downey, Attorney General of Ontario, coming to speak with us on December 3rd. On the 4th, we've got a roadmap for Canadian Black youth, defining recognition and development under the UN Decade for People of African Descent and UN 75. On December 7th, we've got Raoul Bardwaj from the Institute of Corporate Directors coming to speak to us. And December 8th, we've got a panel talking about small business success post-COVID. And I have to talk about our December 10th event, which is our Nation Builder of the Year event. It's our signature event, and it's this year's award's going to go to the frontline workers. Who else are deserving but the frontline workers? So do plan on joining us. We've got a great event planned with a lineup of VIPs and celebrities to celebrate our heroes. And I encourage you all to submit a testimonial for a frontline worker at #National Building Hero of your choice. This can be someone you know, or even yourself if you're a frontline worker. And you've got a chance of winning $5,000. We're going to have a draw for that. So registration for all these events is free. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. Thank you again, Sean. Keep doing what you're doing at CN. I don't want to sell one share. Okay, I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to hold on to them, notwithstanding what my financial advisor says.
Well, listen to him.
Anyways, thanks again. This meeting is now adjourned.